One thing that really stings about becoming a fan of a certain genre of games is when those games stop getting made. Either because of market saturation, an important figurehead in the development company leaving the studio, or the publisher putting an end to a series that had a role in defining or perfecting the genre. Luckily, in recent years, things like these aren't quite the death sentence they once were. Sure, AAA publishers are always going to have their eyes set on the types of games that'll ensure a huge profit, which is why we're mostly seeing the same kinds of battle royale shooters and award-bait action games. But since the rise of independent developers, we've had a chance to see some real gems inspired by the classics that many of us grew up loving. If the developers don't have a publisher to fund their games, though, then these days, they will resort to the wild, unpredictable world of crowdfunding. And don't get me wrong, we've had some amazing throwback-style games that were crowdfunded on Kickstarter. The biggest success story probably being Shovel Knight. And now it's like indie devs can't make a game without including some kind of reference to Shovel Knight in it. It's like against the law or something. But I digress. And Kickstarter has become something of a haven for new, budding game developers to finally make the game of their dreams. But it also became a place where veteran game developers who broke away from AAA developers can get back in the game and make the kinds of things that the big publishing boys essentially won't let them make. And one such man needs no introduction. Formerly of Konami, longtime Castlevania producer Koji Igarashi took to Kickstarter in the year of our Lord 2014 to try and help get funding for his first major title as an independent developer. To make a long story short, he launched the Kickstarter campaign for a game called Bloodstained Symphony of the... Ritual of the Night. And what would a Kickstarter game be without those sweet, sweet stretch goals? One of those stretch goals that was attained was a quote-unquote prequel minigame, and that prequel minigame is what I'll be talking about in this video. 1 year before the release of Ritual of the Night, we were given Bloodstained Circle of the... Curse of the Moon. The truth is, I actually wanted to do a review on this last year around the time it came out, but I was a little too busy with real life stuff, so I guess this review isn't the timeliest one of all. But you know what, screw it, it's my channel, I want to talk about it now, so we'll do it live.
No. We'll do it live! Fuck it!
Released in May 2018 on pretty much everything, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, initially planned to be a prequel to Ritual of the Night, but now being referred to as a spin-off, was developed and self-published by the same developer behind Mighty No. 9.
And make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Oh no. I'm just messing with you, this game ain't that bad. Oh, fun fact, they were originally the development force behind Ritual of the Night, but dropped off of the project and worked on this instead. More on that in a separate video. Anyway, Curse of the Moon follows the swordsman Zangetsu, as he senses the presence of an extremely powerful demon and vows to slay it before it can wreak havoc on mankind. You trek across 9 levels, and immediately as you start playing, if you've ever played any of the classic Castlevania games on the NES, you'll feel right at home here. You've got candles to destroy for sub-weapons and ammo, the same type of side-scrolling action, multiple pathways. Yeah, this is all very heavily inspired by the old-school Castlevania games. Specifically, Castlevania 3, because like that game, this game has multiple playable characters. A total of 4 playable characters with their own weapons and special abilities, and they have their own exclusive set of sub-weapons as well. You first encounter Miriam, the protagonist of Ritual of the Night, who uses a whip similar to that of House Belmont from the Castlevania series. You then meet Alfred, the old magician, or alchemist, who essentially acts as the Sypha Belnadas of the group and has the least amount of health. And finally, we have Jeeble, who is literally just Alucard from... Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, Curse of the Moon is very heavily inspired by Castlevania 3. But it's not as hard as that game. While there are lives in this game, you don't actually lose any lives until you lose all 4 of your characters. And the number of characters you get is actually dependent on whether or not you choose to recruit them. You can actually completely ignore the other characters, or even straight up kill them and take their powers to use as Zangetsu. This actually has an effect on which of the game's endings you get. Despite Curse of the Moon taking many of its cues from Castlevania 3, it's nowhere near as hard as that game. Hell, even the knockback from getting hit I didn't find as annoying here, which by the way is completely disabled if you're playing the game on casual mode. You even get infinite lives on casual mode, but veteran mode, which is essentially this game's normal difficulty, is probably not going to make you break your controller either. I did have a few instances where a level or a boss killed me and made me swear out loud, but again, it's still pretty manageable. Also, little tip here, Alfred has a defensive fireball spell that can be used by all of the other characters, so you can switch to him, activate it, and then switch back to another character. It makes certain enemy-filled pathways a total joke, which is really the only time I ever use him because his standard melee attack is pathetically short-ranged. In terms of standard attacks, I actually found Jeeble to be the most useful since his cover more air, and I could be wrong on this, but they seem to have multiple hitboxes. And since he doesn't have sub-weapons, the purple candles give you more sub-weapon ammo instead. The level design as well is pretty heavily inspired by classic Castlevania. And there's even multiple pathways, including ones that can only be accessed by a certain character. The enemy designs feel like a mix between classic Castlevania and its own original designs, some of which, including whole bosses, are actually in Ritual of the Night, so it serves as a nice little preview to the ones in that game. In fact, one whole level in this game actually serves as the introduction level to Ritual of the Night, with similar enemies and everything. Some of the later levels and boss fights will, expectively, give you more of a challenge, but overall, it's a much more manageable difficulty than the game this game takes its inspirations from. It very much looks like a game from the NES, but it has a bunch of extra colors, and it does a few things with its sprite animations that may not have been possible back then, so there is that extra little bit of visual flourish. And the soundtrack definitely has that old school Castlevania vibe, as to be expected. For just being a Kickstarter stretch goal offshoot game, there was a surprising amount of effort that went into this. They didn't have to make this. Well, okay, maybe they did because they hit a stretch goal, but it doesn't feel anywhere near as half-assed as they could have easily made it. I can easily recommend this game to anyone who may have been interested in playing an old-school Castlevania, but may have been scared off by the horror stories on how difficult they are. This is a much more user-friendly experience by comparison. And I think longtime fans of the old-school Castlevania games will get something out of this as well. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is available on every system that anyone cares about, and only goes for $10. And I think that's a good price for it. Though the game will only take you a couple hours to beat on your first playthrough, I think it's fun enough to make you want to play through it more than once. At least I think so. Curse of the Moon is an excellent appetizer, with the main course, Ritual of the Night, being released a little over a year later. How did that game turn out? Well, come back next time and I'll tell you all about it.
Hey, does anybody want coffee? Who wants coffee? I just made a fresh pot of coffee. Does anybody want coffee?